Well, maybe not talk. Making noises with your mouth. Now, that's basic. And even the most complex of verbal expressions are a small feat for the majority of us. And that is especially true for presenters. For them, pumping out sounds is at the forefront of must-dos. And for your audience to not be able to hear you is death from the moment you step onto the stage. Everyone knows how to talk, but not everyone knows how to talk effectively. To tell your audience something and then have them remember it for at least a respectable amount of time, that takes talent. There's experience, which, is always helpful, but then there's an understanding that comes with it that really matters. Everyone knows how to talk, but people that talk can easily be exhausting to listen to. It takes talent to get your message across, and more importantly, to keep your audience interested. Not everyone can take a boring concept and flip it upside down to create an enjoyable experience for those uninterested or inexperienced with the concept. Everyone knows how to talk, but few know how to keep their audience hooked. So, what is the secret? What is the bait that catches your audience like an unsuspecting salmon? And how do you keep the prey hooked in? I feel most history teachers would agree that their profession is, to some degree, more difficult than others, for one simple reason: the reputation it has. You see, most people seem to agree that social studies consist of random trivia and biased opinions, and as such, cast it aside as being irrelevant. Regardless of the sentiments surrounding it, the course can absolutely be turned into an engaging session, and I myself can say that I have had the fortune to experience this for myself. Certainly, though, the trick is hard to pull off. After all, the past is history for a reason. There's no connection to the present, right? Wrong. You see, you could reel off hours worth of jargon, but until you pull all those words into the reality of your audience, there's no reason for them to keep their focus on you. Take this, for example. The US also played a part during the Second World War, although they took their time to consider the option. After the Japanese attempted to hinder their naval abilities via the attack on Pearl Harbor, action was promptly taken, as the US declared war on Japan in 1941. Upon this statement, the Axis powers sought to defend their allies and retaliate, fully embedding them in the thicket of war. Now, let's do a quick test. Who here in the audience actually remembered that the US declared war in 1931? Show of hands. Don't be shy. Nobody? Oh, one person. Okay, so what happened? Why wasn't I able to capture your attention? Simple. There was no reason to. End of the day, when you go home, take a shower, really clear your mind. None of my historical spiel will really stick out to you. None of it will pop up in your mind, and your day-to-day life will remain nearly entirely unchanged. As a presenter, your job is to change viewpoints and perspectives. Maybe not permanently, as we all grow and change as we people often do, but to cause a difference by connecting the topic of your story to the people that you speak to, enough that they can look at the lives they lead and draw parallels to the story that you present. I have a similar plan here today, actually. I want this group of people in front of me to recognize the true importance of public speaking, not as a fun little gimmick that crops up once a month, but as a soft skill, something that sees usage in almost every aspect of our lives. I want people to raise their voices and realize that there's so much more to public speaking than meets the eye, and I want them to put it into effect. But anyhow, let's try updating our original statement. War is never a good thing, no matter the stakes. But for the sake of America, the end of World War II marked a new shift in power. Considering the disheveled state of their allies and opposition, America was able to affirm itself as a true superpower, and this status remains relatively true even today. Many societal developments that we have grown strongly accustomed to, such as the light bulb, the assembly line, and even the very smartphones we keep in our pockets, are all American inventions, and their progress would have likely been hindered had the Allied forces not emerged victorious that day. Now, there's a good reason to keep listening. Instead of a series of events whose effects lost meaning ages prior, a link has been established between the past and the present. Think about how much our lives would change without the use of the light bulb, or without the jobs that the assembly line calls for, or without this. Without the very things that we take for granted, how much could our lives possibly change? Now this is a speech well worth listening to. Now, absolutely, you should take your main idea and reel it back into the reality of your audience. But there exists more basic mistakes that many of us fall victim to. In fact, many people are encouraged to make these mistakes as much as they possibly can. That is, saying too little with way too much. You see, from an early age, our teachers would have us dump as many words as we possibly could onto a sheet of paper. Our success was essentially built off of our internal vocabulary. Whilst knowing a bunch of fancy jargon is a neat little parlor trick, there also needs to be a reason to keep all these words up here. The most common victim of these symptoms are those of us who enjoy writing science fiction. And who can blame them? World building is some of the most fun that writing has to offer, and the genre kicks the door wide open for creativity. But seriously though, wordiness is something that you'll want to avoid. For as fun as it may be to overcomplicate a simple sentence and just stare at it in all of its illogical glory, it really just sucks for other people to read. Let's say we're writing about some sort of UFO that lands in the middle of a cornfield. The flimsy strands of corn push themselves apart as a great mechanical beast slowed its descent to ground level. And gusts of wind surged throughout the field and would have frozen anyone remotely near them. On this cold, dark night, there was in fact someone to experience these freezing bursts. And as they crept in the grass, they saw a large metal strip slowly pushed open, exposing the frigid air to a deep fog and the unmistakable pungent odor of brimstone. Something gray and rough fell into the grass. The figure stifled a gasp. This thing was afoot, and its claws dug deep into the soil below it. Now, this example is noteworthy for the balance it achieves between simplicity and complication. There is no development of the mystery figure, as it creates a mystery that the story can develop later. Same goes with the aliens. We only know enough to assume that they're likely dangerous, as indicated by their sharp claws. Think about it. I ended up getting more out of my excerpt by saying less. More content doesn't necessarily mean more expression, and that's simply because word count isn't tied to it. Instead, intentional word usage makes all the difference. And in fact, you can find examples of this from the start of my own script. Remember how everyone knows how to talk? I wasn't just saying that for the sake of a hook. The point of that whole shtick was to juxtapose it was actual talent. In other words, I wanted you, the audience, to recognize the true importance of public speaking and the skill that goes behind it. And then afterwards, I could begin building on types of skills to specifically improve on. Now, absolutely, I could have just started repeating phrases that rhymed or something. But that would offer nothing to my performance. Once you realize what you want to get out of your phrases, you can finally start tying significant meaning to your words. So here's a fun fact for you. We've passed over 1,400 words, and, well, that's a lot of words. At this point, your audience will likely be exhausted. And also, you should be able to hold tension for a respectable amount of time using the techniques I described before. You may need to spice things up a bit. If possible, visuals are a concept that are admittedly often overlooked, but potent when applied at the right times. Giving your audience two things to focus on allows them to bounce back and forth between either, giving them a reasonable refresh every once in a while. Absolutely, I could just stick a size 50 font in stock image and call it a day. But in doing so, you lose the chance to create a sense of professionalism. So, one thing we often forget when creating visuals and other kinds of presentations is that these are an accessory to our actual presentation, not something to put at the forefront. In a case like this, we run the risk of our slideshow distracting from the actual presentation itself, which would frankly procure the opposite reaction from the audience. Best way to avoid this is to try simplifying our text. Maybe all these words, really not that important in the long run. At the same time, too little just won't do. Whilst this does help your audience to affirm what the topic is, there's just so much more that you can do with this. Logically then, we need to create a balance between vagueness and complexity. Slideshows can range quite a bit, depending on your individual taste. But what are some basics for an easy to understand presentation? Workable visuals, topic sentences to prevent cluttering and distraction, simplistic and to the point bullets all paired with an elegant theme. I'd say this is a good basis to build your presentation off of. Hopefully, we all can finally agree that everyone knows how to talk. But hopefully, we can also agree that there's more to it than that. Making a point effectively is a skill that comes with both experience and tactics. Some of those being discussed are relevance, simplicity, and visuals. Now, absolutely, there are a ton of other techniques that, for the sake of time, I've chosen to exclude. But these will come with time. End of the day, there's nothing that'll be the professionalism that stems from experience. And that also means that there's no cheat code that'll bring you to the top in a heartbeat. But for now, I'd say you all have a head start. And these points will help keep your audience engaged with what you're trying to get across, or at the very least, where those beliefs came from. With the points I've mentioned and the wisdom of practice, you too can create a speech well worth listening to. Thanks for listening.